fact that Kate made the effort to go to church yesterday where she knew she would be photographed is obviously sending us a signal that she was well enough to travel to Scotland.
In the serene embrace of Scotland's rolling hills, a centuries-old kirk near Balmoral Castle stood as a sanctuary, its steeple reaching toward heaven as if to echo the enduring presence of God. This was where Kate, against all odds, made her poignant return. It was August 25th, 2024. Since her diagnosis with cancer in March, the global community had followed her story with prayers and heartfelt concern. Few could have predicted the weight and wonder of this seemingly ordinary Sunday morning. The congregation arrived early. Locals, accustomed to the royal family's occasional presence, mingled with visitors drawn by hope. Hope to glimpse the princess and perhaps to join in prayer for her recovery. Kate's public appearances had been sparse since her diagnosis. A dignified moment at Wimbledon in July, a stirring video message during the Olympics, and now this quiet act of devotion in a countryside chapel. When Kate arrived alongside King Charles, the gathered crowd stilled, their murmurings replaced by a palpable hush. Elegantly understated, she moved with grace, her bearing regal yet deeply human. There was something luminous in her presence, a quiet strength that seemed to ripple outward, as if the prayers of thousands had wrapped themselves around her like armor. Though her face bore traces of recent trials, her eyes held a calm radiance that spoke of hope, born of faith. This wasn't merely a royal obligation. It was a deeply personal moment, an act of trust in God. The service began, the familiar chords of hymns rising like whispers of comfort. Each note seemed to unite the room in reverence. The pastor spoke of God's steadfast love in times of hardship, and though many listened intently, some couldn't help but glance at Kate, wondering how the words might resonate with her own journey. Then, as the service drew to a close, the unexpected happened. Kate stood and walked to the front. Her movements were deliberate, steady. Her head was high, her presence commanding not by pomp, but by a quiet resolve that drew every eye. A reverent stillness swept through the church as she turned to face the gathered congregation. When she spoke, her voice carried the warmth of sincerity, the strength of someone who had faced life's shadows and held fast. "I want to thank each of you," she began, her words tender yet firm. "Your prayers, your kindness, and your faith have given me strength in ways I cannot fully express." There was no grandeur, no royal flourish, just the unguarded words of a woman profoundly touched by grace. Her audience hung on every syllable, hearts stirred by the vulnerability of her message. "In these months," she said, her voice unwavering, "I have found new depth in the words of Psalm 23. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me." Her gaze swept across the room, meeting the eyes of strangers and friends alike. "God's presence has been my constant companion, and your prayers have been a testament to His love through your kindness." The church seemed to breathe in her words, a silence heavy with meaning wrapping around them. Many had hoped for a glimpse of royalty, but they had received something far greater, a witness to faith in the midst of adversity. "I have reflected deeply on life, on family, and on what truly matters," Kate continued. "Even in the darkest moments, I have seen God's light. It has sustained me at every step, and I trust it will continue to do so." Her final words hung in the air, a quiet blessing that lingered long after they were spoken. "Thank you for your prayers, your love, and for reminding me that no matter the darkness, we are never alone. God is with us, always." For a moment, silence reigned, a stillness that spoke volumes. Then, as if by divine prompting, the congregation began to sing. It wasn't planned, but it felt perfectly right. A spontaneous hymn of praise rising from their hearts. It wasn't just what Kate said that morning that stayed with people. It was the way she said it, the raw honesty behind every word. Her cancer diagnosis had sent shockwaves far and wide, and for months, speculation swirled about her health and what the future might hold. But here, in this quiet little church, none of that seemed to matter. She wasn't standing before them as a princess or a public figure. She was simply a woman who had been through the fire, clinging to her faith through it all. Her voice was steady, but there was a softness to it, an unshakable humility that cut straight to the heart. "Faith isn't something we build in our strongest moments," she said, her eyes sweeping the room, "but in the ones when we feel completely broken. It's when everything feels impossible, when you think you can't go on, that you have to hold on to hope. Because hope," she paused, her voice catching ever so slightly, "hope is what carries us when there's nothing else left." Her words lingered in the air, wrapping themselves around the congregation like a warm embrace. Tears rolled down cheeks, and others simply sat still, too moved to react. This wasn't a speech. It wasn't some carefully crafted statement. It was real. It was raw. And it was hers. She began to step back, but something stopped her. Kate hesitated for a moment, then turned back, as if drawn by a feeling she couldn't ignore. "It's moments like this," she said quietly, her voice carrying a weight of gratitude, "that remind me of the power of hope and faith. Thank you for helping me find it again." And with that, she returned to her seat. The room was utterly still, the silence charged with emotion. Around her, people sat motionless, soaking in what they had just witnessed. It wasn't about royalty or tradition. It was about humanity, about a woman who had dared to lay herself bare. The minister rose to close the service, but even he seemed unsure of how to follow what had just unfolded. For a moment, it seemed like the stillness would last forever. Then, from somewhere in the back, a voice rose. It was hesitant at first, the notes wavering, but the melody was unmistakable. It was an old hymn, one that spoke of hope and trust in God through life's hardest moments. The sound spread slowly but surely. Others joined in, their voices blending into something both powerful and tender. The hymn grew, filling the little church with a warmth that seemed almost alive. It wasn't planned, it wasn't orchestrated, but it felt like exactly what was meant to happen. Tears flowed freely. Some wept quietly, while others bowed their heads in silent prayer. Families huddled closer, hands clasped tightly together as if to hold on to the moment. It was as though everyone in the room was connected by something bigger than themselves, something sacred. Kate sat with her head bowed, her hands folded in her lap. Her lips moved slightly, as though she was praying silently. When the hymn reached its final note, she lifted her eyes and looked at King Charles. Their eyes met, and in that one look, they shared something deeper than words. A quiet understanding, a shared faith, and a steadying hope. Both Kate and Charles were carrying more than the weight of their titles that day. Quietly, they had been walking parallel paths of suffering, each battling their own cancer diagnoses, each leaning on the other for strength. It was a private burden they carried together, but in this moment, surrounded by the warmth of hymns and the shared faith of the congregation, they seemed at peace. As Kate returned to her seat, Charles gently reached for her hand. His grasp was firm but kind, a silent exchange of reassurance. The hymn swept over them like a wave, not just a melody, but a prayer in every note. It was as though the entire room had become a vessel for God's presence, offering comfort and renewal to everyone inside. For months, the public had watched their lives unfold with a mix of curiosity and concern. But here, inside these ancient stone walls, they were not just royalty. They were two souls leaning into their faith, drawing strength from the same well of hope as everyone around them. The hymn seemed to last forever, as if no one wanted it to end. The atmosphere was thick with emotion, the kind that goes beyond words and speaks directly to the heart. Tears flowed freely, hands were clasped tightly, and breaths were held as the final notes faded into silence. For a moment, no one moved. It felt as though something sacred had just transpired, something that would stay with them long after they left the church. The weight of Kate's words, the hymn's spontaneous beauty, and the unspoken bond between Kate and Charles had created a moment of profound unity. When Kate and Charles stood to leave, there was a visible change in them. Their gazes were softer, but filled with resolve, their steps unhurried, yet steady. Whatever lay ahead for them, one thing was certain: the strength they had drawn from this day would carry them forward. The congregation rose slowly, reluctant to break the holy stillness. For those closest to the royal family, this day wasn't just about the service. It was a testament to the power of faith in the face of life's hardest battles. As Kate and Charles made their way out of the church, all eyes followed them. Their connection was undeniable, less about royal decorum and more about the shared understanding that comes from walking through suffering together. On the church steps, they exchanged a few quiet words, their expressions marked by mutual respect and love. Then, something extraordinary happened. A young girl, no older than 8, stepped forward, clutching a small bouquet of wildflowers in her trembling hands. Her parents stood a few paces back, watching nervously. Kate caught sight of her and knelt down, meeting the girl at eye level. "Thank you," Kate said softly, accepting the flowers with a warm smile. The girl, wide-eyed and awestruck, managed to whisper, "You're so brave, Your Highness." Kate's expression shifted, her composure faltering for just a moment. Then she smiled again, her voice quiet but steady. "You're brave too," she replied, her words carrying the weight of genuine admiration. The little girl beamed, and in that simple exchange, something profound became clear. Kate's strength wasn't just about her own battle, it was about inspiring others to find theirs. Her faith, her vulnerability, and her resilience were lighting a path for others to follow, showing them that even in the darkest times, there is hope. As the car carrying Kate Middleton and King Charles pulled away from Sy Kirk, the reality of what had just transpired began to sink in for those who had been there. Public appearances were nothing new for the royal family. But this wasn't a mere obligation or duty. This was different, deeper, more personal. It was two people, bound by love, faith, and their shared trials, standing at the crossroads of their private pain and public roles. And in that sacred intersection, they found strength, not just for themselves, but for everyone who had watched them walk this journey with courage. For Kate, the road ahead was shrouded in uncertainty. While her doctors assured her that she was making progress after her cancer diagnosis, the emotional toll couldn't be ignored. Every public appearance felt like a test, not just of her physical endurance, but of her spirit. Yet today, standing side by side with Charles, who carried his own hidden burdens, she felt something stir within her. The scars of the battle were still there, but so was the quiet resilience God had been growing in her heart. For King Charles, the weight of leadership had grown heavier in recent months. Though he had kept his illness largely private, those closest to him saw how it was wearing on him. Yet his commitment to duty never wavered. He had spent decades preparing for the crown, but no amount of training could have readied him for the challenges that came with both his own struggles and watching the next generation, like Kate, face trials of their own. As their car navigated the winding roads of Balmoral, the silence between them was not awkward, but comfortable. It was the kind of silence that spoke volumes, a shared understanding that required no words. The late afternoon sunlight softened the landscape, casting a golden glow over the hills. Charles broke the silence, his voice low and sincere. "You did well today," he said, a faint smile touching his lips. Kate turned to him, offering a soft smile in return. "Thank you," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. She looked out the window, her thoughts still with the congregation they had left behind. "It felt like more than just a service," she added after a moment. "It was," Charles agreed, his gaze following hers. "These moments matter more than people realize. It's where we find our strength, not just for ourselves, but for others too." They both knew that more challenges lay ahead. The road forward, both personal and public, would demand everything they had. But in moments like this, they were reminded that strength didn't come from their titles or positions. It came from faith, from leaning on God, and from the support of those who loved them. As news of Kate's emotional return to Kirk spread, it quickly captured the public's attention. Photographs and videos of her heartfelt address and the image of her standing beside King Charles flooded media outlets and social platforms. But it wasn't just the visuals that resonated. It was the raw emotion, the honesty, and the deep sense of faith that shone through. For years, the royal family had been seen as symbols of grace and strength. But this moment revealed something even more profound: their humanity. Across the world, people responded with empathy and admiration. Social media lit up with reactions. "Seeing Kate today gave me chills," one post read. "She's faced so much, but her faith and courage shine through. It's a reminder that even in our weakest moments, God's strength carries us." Another wrote, "The royal family felt so real today. Kate's words about hope and faith were exactly what I needed to hear. She reminded us all that even in darkness, there's light to be found." The event didn't just inspire praise, it invited others to share their own stories. People opened up about their battles with illness, loss, and moments of doubt. Many found comfort in Kate's vulnerability, seeing in her a reflection of their own struggles. The image of Kate and Charles, standing united in their challenges, became a powerful symbol. It was no longer just about royal duty. It was about faith, survival, and the unshakable hope that keeps us moving forward. In the days that followed, the media recounted every detail of the church service, from Kate's heartfelt words to the hymn that seemed to rise spontaneously from the congregation. But no article or headline could capture the full depth of what had transpired. For those who witnessed it, the experience was transformative, a reminder of God's presence even in life's most difficult seasons. For Kate and Charles, this marked the beginning of a new chapter, one where their personal battles would be inseparable from their public roles. Yet it was also a chapter filled with renewed purpose. Their struggles had drawn them closer to their faith and to those they served. And for the world watching, this moment served as a poignant reminder. No matter our position in life, we all face trials. But through faith, hope, and the strength we draw from each other, we can find the courage to keep going.